Hey guys. Well, let's begin. Tonight we walk barefoot through mud-soaked paths, where the air smells like wet straw and chimney soot, and a single candle fights against the damp. You're waking up inside a thatch-roofed hut where light leaks in through cracks in the wood, and every creak is either a mouse or the wind. Or both. The straw-stuffed mattress beneath you itches like sin, and the chill in your bones makes you miss the pig who sometimes shares your bed. To be honest, you probably won't survive this. So, before the lights go out, click like and subscribe, but only if you're brave enough to return tomorrow night. And hey, post your location and local time. We're all peasants tonight, from Sydney to Saskatchewan. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan, because silence makes this story worse. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin your day not with coffee, but with a draught of water from a barrel that's slightly green. You stretch, if you can call it that, bumping your head on the low rafters. Outside, the mist still clings to the ground, and everything smells damp. You can barely see 10 feet ahead, but that's fine. You already know what's out there. Mud, chickens, and misery. Your hut is one room. Walls are wattle and daub, sticks and mud plastered together, with the desperation of people who can't afford stone or real timber. The roof leaks in 3 places, maybe 4 if the wind's wrong. You share the space with your family, a few tools, and the occasional sheep when it's cold. There's no chimney, just a hole in the roof, so every winter you live inside a slow-burning smoke cloud that seeps into your clothes, your lungs, and You step outside and your foot sinks immediately into thick muck. It never dries. People joke that your village has 2 seasons, mud and thicker mud. The path through town is a blend of rainwater, pig waste, and rotting straw. Somewhere under your foot, you just heard a squelch you'd rather not investigate. This is your world, a cluster of crooked huts surrounded by open fields and a looming forest. The fields belong to your lord, mostly. The forest belongs to no one, which means don't get caught poaching. The forest is also full of wolves, spirits, and possibly angry druids, depending on who you ask. You see your neighbour, old Henrik, leaning on a hoe. His back is bent like a bowstring, and he has fewer teeth every time he smiles. Weather's turning, he says, which is code for expect rain, hunger, and back pain. You nod and grab your own tool, what passes for a spade, and start working a patch of land so stubborn it might be made of iron. Historians still argue whether the average peasant worked harder than modern labourers, but you don't need a degree to know your spine disagrees. The work is endless. The food is never enough. But the gossip? Oh, the gossip is pure gold. Someone's cow gave birth to a 2-headed calf last week. Some say it's a miracle, others say it's a curse. Everyone agrees it smells terrible. There's also a rumour that a tanner in the next village has learned to make boots waterproof. You doubt it. Your own shoes are scraps of leather laced with hope and twine. Waterproof would be a fantasy. As the day drags on, the village begins to stir. Smoke curls from hut roofs, and the smith starts hammering something behind his shed. You can smell iron and singed hair. A group of children chase each other around the communal well, laughing with the kind of abandon that only comes from not yet knowing what taxes are. One child trips and lands in the mud. Her mother yells something about wasting clean water, an irony you don't have time to unpack. You break for a midday meal, which is overly generous to call it that. It's more like a pause to chew something. Today's fare, a slice of barley bread, hard enough to break teeth, and a thin gruel that tastes like warm sadness. Still, you eat every drop. Waste not, starve faster. Occasionally there's a surprise. A carrot that wasn't shriveled, a handful of wild garlic, or once, a stolen onion. That was a good week. People sometimes imagine the past smelled like fresh hay and baking bread. You laugh. No, it smells like wood smoke, sweat, and latrines. Oh, and chickens. Always chickens. You pass a coop where a rooster is having what can only be described as an identity crisis. It's been crowing since midnight. You consider throwing a rock. You don't. Violence leads to feuds, and feuds lead to someone's goat going missing. You can't afford a goat. Evening draws in faster than you'd like. The sun dips behind a tangle of clouds and the sky turns a colour somewhere between pewter and regret. You return home, tired, damp, and sore in new places. Your hands are blistered, your knees ache. You're 25, which is basically senior citizen status in your world. Inside your hut, the fire is out, so the place is as warm as a crypt. You light a single candle. The wax is smoky and makes your eyes water, but it beats total darkness. Your mother is stirring something in a pot. It smells vaguely of cabbage, which means it's a special night. You eat, you scratch at your flea bites, and you listen as someone down the road starts singing a lullaby off-key. Your sister joins in. You don't. Then, just as your eyelids droop, you hear a scream. Not a big one, just a sharp little "ah" that cuts through the night. You freeze. Listen. Nothing. Maybe a rat, maybe a ghost. Maybe the tanner's daughter finally saw her reflection in the well water. You roll over. This is your world. Muddy, cold, flea-ridden, and somehow still going. You wake up before dawn because the rooster never really stopped. It's still dark, but there's a cold sheen of blue-grey light leaking through the warped slats of your hut wall. Your back protests as you sit up on the straw bedding, limbs stiff from yesterday's work, and your nose is already filled with the rich scent of damp earth and ash. It's farming day again, like every day, and you've got nothing but a hoe, hope, and a breakfast that might be a mistake. You chew last night's leftover barley bread, now fully hardened into something between a weapon and a religious test. You dip it into a bowl of thin, oniony water that dares to call itself soup. Then you grab your hoe, a glorified stick with a chunk of rusted metal lashed to it, and head out the door. The fields wait for no one. You shuffle past other peasants who look exactly like you, mud on their shins, bags under their eyes, and that deep-set expression of, well, this is life. You all trudge together to the strip of land assigned to your family. It's not yours, of course. Nothing really is. It belongs to the Lord, and he lets you borrow it as long as you pay in green, labour, and whatever dignity you've got left. Your plot looks like it lost a fight with a thunderstorm, a goat, and possibly God. It's all clumps, rocks, and stubborn weeds. You start swinging the hoe in slow, rhythmic hacks, loosening soil that hasn't known softness since the last ice age. Your shoulders burn after 20 minutes, but this is just the warm-up. Historians still argue whether medieval crop yields were really that awful, or just badly recorded. But you don't need a ledger to tell you this ground is stingy. You plant barley, rye, maybe some oats if you're feeling fancy. Wheat is for rich people and monasteries. You saw wheat once. It looked smug. Your hands blister quickly. There's no such thing as gloves. You wrap cloth around your palms, but it's like bandaging a storm. The work is back-breaking. You bend, hoe, toss, bend again. The sun's not even up yet, and your shirt is already damp with sweat, which means it'll soon be crusted with salt, which means more itching tonight. Lovely. Morning, you spot someone down the lane using a weirdly bent stick and muttering to himself. It's Bierik, the innovator of the village. Last year he tried to create a plough out of fence posts and chicken bones. This year he's convinced if you sing to the seeds, they grow faster. You can't argue with him, because last harvest his turnips were bigger than yours. And that haunts you. The village doesn't have real ploughs unless the Lord lends one, and only if you're part of the favoured few. Even then, you still have to borrow oxen, and good luck finding a pair that isn't too old, too slow, or too dead. That's why most peasants use handles, worn down to splinters, sharpened on rocks and passed down like heirlooms. A fringe belief passed around the tavern says if you bury a frog in your field on the first full moon of spring, your barley will double. You did it once. The barley did not double, but you did hear croaking from under the soil for a week, which made you avoid that patch entirely. Lunch arrives late and light. You break for a quick bite, some dried peas, and if you're lucky, a scrap of lard to smear on the barley loaf. It's chewy, earthy, and almost entirely joyless, but it fuels you just enough to keep digging. You hear rumours of other villages using something called a three-field system. Supposedly you rotate crops between 3 strips, one for winter grain, one for spring grain, one left fallow. Sounds smart. Your village hasn't adopted it yet, because the elder says, if it ain't broke, while chewing moss and sneezing uncontrollably. The sun climbs higher, and so does the stink. Sweat mixes with manure, and the flies come out for their shift. You swat lazily at them, but they're persistent. One lands on your nose and seems personally offended when you flick it. You curse it, then apologize. Nearby, a group of women are winnowing last season's grain. They toss handfuls into the air and let the breeze separate husk from seed. It's delicate work, surprisingly beautiful, like watching slow Mamani snow in reverse. One of them sneezes violently into the basket. The others ignore it. You're all too tired to care. By mid-afternoon you pause to stretch your back. The pain is a constant hum now, like a low chant echoing up your spine. You look out at the field and wonder how you'll ever finish it. And this is just the spring planting. You'll be back in the same spot come harvest, praying the barley hasn't been cursed by mildew, frost, or some bored sick. Occasionally someone finds a bit of pottery, or a coin, or a bone. You once found a rusted blade deep in the soil, maybe Roman, maybe just really old junk. You brought it home, showed it off, and then used it as a doorstop. Look, such is the glory of peasant life. Evening creeps in, and you return home sore, sunburned, and a little delirious. You pass by a neighbour's plot and catch the scent of leeks. You consider borrowing one, but your conscience and the fact that she has a mean dog stop you. Back in your hut, your mother is peeling something unidentifiable. Turnip, she says. You think it might be a rock. You nod and sit on a stool that creaks beneath your weight. Dinner is warm, mostly edible, and welcome. Someone mentions the sky looks red tonight. Good weather tomorrow, says one person. Sign of war, says another. Definitely dragons, says the third, and everyone chuckles. But no one laughs too hard, just in case. You lie down once more on the itchy straw, listening to the crackle of the fire and the rustle of something, rat or spirit, under the floorboards. You stretch your sore muscles, think about tomorrow's work, and fall asleep wondering if next season's harvest will be just enough to survive, or just short enough to ruin everything. You wake before the sun, again. The fire's out, your breath fogs the air, and your toes are as numb as your dreams. Outside, the wind moans low and long across the thatched roofs like some tired god exhaling. Your stomach growls, but breakfast won't be exciting. Today, it's just bread. Again. But not the good kind. You chew a slab of barley bread that crumbles like dry clay and tastes a little like ash and maybe dirt. And yes, that is a rock in there. A little pebble, baked right in. You sigh. That's normal. Most medieval bread isn't sifted well. You'd almost miss it if you didn't have to stop and spit out grit every few bites. Barley's your staple, but not your friend. It's coarse, tough, and makes bread heavy. Wheat is rare and sacred, almost mythical, a grain for priests, merchants, and the occasional festival miracle. But barley? Barley is loyal, reluctantly loyal, the kind of grain that shows up at the party but complains the whole time. Your family grinds it at the mill, paying in coin or flour to use the Lord's stones. You've heard horror stories about millers skimming extra from the sacks. It's practically a medieval meme. Everyone says their local miller's a thief, and to be fair, he probably is. He's the only man who smells like flour and money. But bread is life. Flat, grey-brown, possibly disease-laced life. See, every loaf hides a danger your growling belly can't always afford to fear. Ergot. It's a fungus that sometimes infects rye and barley, especially in wet seasons, which is basically every season. If you eat infected bread, you might hallucinate, convulse, or die. Or all three, in that order. Some call it St. Anthony's fire. Sounds almost noble until your fingers turn black and fall off. Historians still argue whether the Great Famine of 1315 made ergot poisoning more common, or if it was always lurking quietly in your loaf like a fungal jump scare. Either way, it's a risk you live with. You eat cautiously but consistently. Hunger beats caution 9 times out of 10. During hard seasons, flour gets stretched with whatever's on hand. Acorns, bark, dried beans, sometimes clay. Yes, actual dirt. It adds weight, makes you feel full, probably takes a few years off your life, but you're not exactly building a retirement plan anyway. Lunch is more bread, maybe soup if you're lucky. It's thin, with a flavour that whispers vegetable without specifying which. Every few weeks, someone finds a sack of millet or a few apples gone soft, and suddenly there's porridge or a cider so sour it could strip paint. But usually, it's bread again. Some days the village baker offers community loaves, big, round, crusty things shared among multiple families. They smell better than they taste, like all the best lies. The crust is thick enough to break teeth. The inside is dense and vaguely warm. It's heavy in your hands and your belly, which is the point. Heavy food makes slow starvation feel just a little less sharp. You remember when a travelling monk passed through last spring. He carried actual wheat bread, white as clouds, soft as sin. He let you smell it, not eat it, just smell. You wept, quietly. Dinner? Surprise. Bread. This time toasted slightly over the fire, rubbed with garlic if someone's got any. You have none, so you chew the toasted corner and imagine it's meat, or cheese, or literally anything else. Bread is so central to your life that people fight over it. Literally. Last year a baker down in a nearby village shorted a batch of loaves and was chased into the river by angry peasants. You didn't help, but you did cheer. Bread riots are a thing. Probably the only kind of riot where throwing food is the message. Your mother remembers a time when chestnuts were used instead of barley. Sweeter, she says. You wouldn't know. All you know is barley, sometimes oat, barley again, and the occasional festival treat that tastes like slightly less awful barley. And then there's ale. Oh yes, liquid bread. Most of the village drinks weak ale daily, not just for joy, but because water isn't always safe. Ale kills bacteria, though no one calls it that yet, and it makes your meals go down a little easier. It also makes Uncle Wolf dance shirtless, which is less ideal. Brewing ale is half science, half hopes and prayers. You toss barley into hot water, stir it around with herbs, nettle, maybe hops if you're lucky, then wait and pray. Some people claim it heals, others claim it summons demons. Either way, it's less dangerous than the well. Probably. There's also a deep superstition about bread. Some say if your loaf cracks down the centre while baking, it means the devil passed nearby. Others say it's just bad kneading. You believe both, just to be safe. One old widow swears you can trap evil spirits in bread by baking it under a new moon. She gave you one once. You buried it in the woods, just in case. And what about feasting, you wonder? It's not like you haven't heard the term. But in your world, feast just means a slightly larger portion of the same ingredients, maybe with a beet or a rare scrap of bacon boiled into oblivion. But oh, when that rare day comes, harvest festival, marriage, or Saint's Day, and someone brings out a fresh, hot loaf with actual butter, people cry. You've seen it. You did it. The local priest once explained that man does not live by bread alone. You wanted to ask what else he suggested. Air? He had cheese on his plate at the time. It felt insulting. At the end of the day, you lie back on your creaky straw bed, belly filled with just enough to dream. In your dreams, the bread is soft, the grains are pure, and your teeth aren't cracked. In real life, you'll wake up with crumbs on your face, a sore jaw, and the taste of ash and barley lingering on your tongue. You wake to coughing. Someone outside, maybe 2 huts down. A rasping, wet sound, sharp and hollow like a bag of stones hitting the floor. You pause, listen. A baby starts wailing, and the mother's voice follows, too soft to make out, too panicked to ignore. You don't ask questions. No one does. Not here. Not anymore. The morning air smells different. Richer, too, still. You notice it as you pull your tunic over your head. It's the kind of quiet you get before bad weather, or bad news, or both. The sky is the same dull grey, but something in your gut tells you today will not be normal. At the communal well, nobody's gathered. That's strange. People always gather. It's where you gossip, fill your pails, and measure how alive everyone else still is. You draw water alone. It creaks loudly in the silence. No one says good morning. Word spreads like sickness. They say old Henrik's boy is dead. He was fine yesterday, running, laughing. Today? Gone. Black boils under the armpits, a purple rash on his chest. Some say he coughed blood. Others say he just stopped breathing in his sleep. You've heard whispers of this. A sickness in the next county, a shadow crossing through towns, monks dying mid-prayer. But that was elsewhere, and in peasant logic, elsewhere might as well be another planet. Not anymore. Historians still argue whether the Black Death moved slower through rural villages, or if it simply killed too fast to record. But you don't need a parchment to tell you what it looks like up close. The fear in a mother's eyes, the sudden silence in a house that used to echo with laughter. You finish your chores with speed today, feeding chickens, turning the compost pile, checking for rot in the grain sack, but your eyes are everywhere, looking for boils, watching for fevers. The local priest holds a prayer vigil. You attend, of course. Everyone does. He says it's a test from God. You believe him. Or at least you pretend to. You're not stupid. The church owns half the land and all the answers. During the vigil, a woman starts coughing. Not just once. Again and again, deep and raw. Her husband pulls her outside. She's not seen again. Back in your hut that night, your family tries to act normal. Your mother stirs onion porridge. Your little brother picks at a scab on his arm. You eat in silence. You chew slow. You listen hard. That's when you start noticing the little signs. A chill that doesn't go away. A neighbour's door that stays shut for 3 days. A smell on the breeze. Sharp and wrong. A mix of sweat, rot, and fear. One morning, 2 men show up with carts. They don't speak. They just knock once, wait, then load bodies wrapped in cloth, limp as laundry, and move on. You don't know who sent them. You don't ask. It spreads faster than fire. One family vanishes in a week. Another boards up their door. The blacksmith's wife dies mid-meal, face down in soup. Even the chickens get quieter. You hear of fringe cures. A man claims garlic keeps the sickness away. He smells like a stew and is still alive, so maybe. Someone else drinks nothing but weak ale and says it purifies the blood. He looks terrible, but he's walking. A few cover their mouths with herbs. Rosemary, lavender, even crushed beet leaves. Anything to keep the smell out. Anything to pretend you have control. The plague doesn't care. You watch your best friend get sick. His name is Jory. He's only 16. He jokes at first. Maybe it's just hay fever. But you both know hay doesn't give you purple toes. 3 days later, he's gone. No funeral, just a blanket and the cart. The village tries quarantine. A rope is strung around the perimeter. No one comes in, no one leaves. Doesn't help. The sickness was already here. It was always here. You sleep in shifts now. Someone always awake, just in case. You keep a knife by your bed, not for thieves, but for mercy. Your uncle said it once, better to go quick than choking on your own blood. You didn't ask what he meant. You don't have to now. Some start to believe it's punishment. A local friar preaches that God is angry. Angry at sins, angry at the world, angry at you. People flog themselves in the village square. They whip their backs, chant prayers, bleed into the mud. You watch, horrified, fascinated. One collapses, never gets back up. You begin to notice who's left. The loud ones are quiet now. The gossipers stop talking. Children stop playing. Life thins out like soup made with too much water and not enough hope. And then, slowly, the cart stops coming. The sickness burns out as fast as it came. 1 week you're counting dead by the hour. The next there are fewer new coughs. The week after, silence again. But this time it feels different. Less like dread, more like emptiness. You survive. Not because you were strong, not because you were clever, but because, somehow, your name wasn't on whatever list the plague was reading. You go outside, you look around. Half the huts are empty. Grass grows taller in untended fields. You can hear birds again. You wish you couldn't. There's no funeral, no festival, just a quiet agreement to keep moving. You rebuild fences, you dig new graves. You wash everything with vinegar because someone said that helps. You don't believe it, but it gives your hands something to do. Someone starts laughing again a few weeks later. Just once. It sounds strange. You eat barley bread and remember the faces you don't see anymore. You count your family, recount, count again, fewer. And still, ye-ho, plant, wait, you're still here. Still breathing. Still walking through a world that feels quieter, heavier. The plague hasn't taken you, not yet. But now, even a sneeze makes everyone around you freeze. You clear your throat once, and an old man crosses himself. The fear hasn't gone away. It's just woven into daily life, like smoke in your tunic or fleas in your bedding. Your body aches from the work, but you push through because idleness invites dread. This morning, though, something's different. Your little sister woke with a swollen knee and a fever. Not plague-like, just sick. But no one wants to be the one who just gets ill anymore. You wrap her in old linens, place a damp rag on her forehead, and whisper a prayer you barely remember. There's no doctor coming. See, when you get sick, you don't reach for pills or thermometers. You reach for moss, garlic, animal fat, and blind optimism. Peasant medicine is equal parts folklore, chants, and sheer stubbornness. You don't really heal, you just endure. The village healer is called Auntie Mirren. She's not your aunt. She's not really anyone's aunt. She's somewhere between midwife, witch, and miracle worker. Her house smells like wet herbs and burnt goat hair, and her fingernails are permanently green. You go to her with injuries, stomach cramps, fevers, and even heartbreak. She treats all of them the same way, with a muttered chant and something foul tasting in a wooden cup. Today she's crushing something with a stone pestle when you arrive. She burning? She asks without turning. You nod. She grunts. That's the closest you'll get to sympathy. Mirren gives you a pouch of dried toad flax and tells you to steep it in hot water, then pour it on your sister's chest while chanting a rhyme about St. Elmo's fire. You don't know who Elmo is. You don't ask. You just go home and do it. Because what else is there? Historians still argue whether medieval herbalists helped more than they harmed. Some treatments like honey and garlic poultices have modern merit. Others, not so much. Remember the cure for toothache that involves placing a dead mouse against your jaw? Yeah, that's real. No, you haven't tried it. You've seen treatments for everything. Boils. Press a hot poker to them. Fevers, bleed the patient. That's right. Open a vein and let the sickness drain out. Headaches. Trepanation. A hole in the skull to let the bad spirits escape. You don't know anyone who's had it and lived, but it's still... There's also the curious practice of urine tasting. That's right. If your pee is sweet, you might have too much hot in your system. If it's cloudy, you might be near death. There's a whole colour chart. You don't own it. But you've seen the baker sniff a chamber pot once and nod solemnly like he was reading tea leaves. You didn't ask follow-up questions. When your sister's fever finally breaks, you feel like you've cheated death. Again. And you add Auntie Mirren's toad flax brew to the short, mysterious list of things that might work sometimes if the moon is right. Meanwhile, other villagers try their own luck. One woman buries 9 chicken feathers at the edge of the forest and prays facing east. A man eats a boiled lizard tail every full moon. A boy rubs mouldy cheese on his neck. All swear by their methods. All still look pale. Every illness becomes a community event. You get sick, 10 people offer advice. None of it makes sense. All of it sounds confident. Rub mustard on your feet. Sleep with a cat on your chest. Drink rainwater that's touched iron. You smile, nod, try none of it, and maybe you recover anyway. Or you don't. Your own go-to remedy is simpler. willow bark tea. It tastes awful. It sometimes helps with aches, or it just distracts you from them. Either way, you drink it. There's also relics. Sacred bones, saintly teeth, a scrap of cloth said to have touched a holy monk's elbow. People travel miles to press these to their wounds. You once kissed a cracked wooden toe that supposedly belonged to St. Blaise. You're not sure it worked, but you haven't lost that toe yet, so maybe. And don't forget charms. Every family has them. Woven cords, painted stones, tiny metal crosses. You wear one around your neck, a crooked twig tied with red thread. Your grandmother swore it warded off fevers. You haven't taken it off in 5 years. You won't start now. Some fringe beliefs claim you can trap illness in a loaf of bread, bake it, bury it, and the sickness dies with it. You tried that once, when your cousin had spots. The bread went mouldy. So did your cousin. No one was sure what killed who. But occasionally, something works. A blister disappears. A cough fades. Someone too weak to walk yesterday sits up today. And that's all the proof you need. Miracles happen. Just not often. Not loud. They sneak in like sunlight through thatched roofs, thin, pale, maybe a little cold. One rare day, a travelling doctor visits the village. He wears a strange hat and carries a bag full of little glass bottles. He smells like soap and onions. Everyone gathers to gawk at him, but most are too scared to let him touch them. His fingers are stained yellow from herbs. He talks about humours and imbalances. He prescribes leeches for nearly everything. You watch as he places one on a boy's ankle. The boy faints. The leech doesn't. You don't let him near you. You're not brave. Or maybe you're too brave. As night falls, your sister sleeps peacefully for the first time in days. You sit beside her, hand on her chest, counting the soft rise and fall of her breath like it's the only math you trust. The fire crackles. A muff thumps gently against the wall. Your mother hums an old lullaby that may also be a protection charm. No one remembers which. Tomorrow someone else will get sick. Tomorrow someone else might not get better. But tonight, your sister breathes, and the house feels warm, and the sickness, just for a moment, stays outside the door. You kneel in the cold church, stiff from another night on straw. The air inside smells of wax, damp stone, and a hint of mildew that never quite leaves. It's Sunday. One of the few days you get a break from farming, unless it's planting season, or harvest, or the Lord needs something, or it rains and ruins everything. You clasp your hands. Your fingers are cracked and sore, stained with soil and soot. But still, you press them together, because this is what you do. This is what everyone does. Church isn't just where you pray, it's where you exist, where your name gets recorded, where your soul is tallied. The priest is already chanting, Latin mostly. You don't understand the words, but you nod along. When the bell rings, you cross yourself. When the incense comes out, you hold your breath. It smells like burned honey and old rope. Someone coughs behind you, you flinch. Faith is your strongest tool and your heaviest chain. You pray because you believe, or maybe because you're scared not to, or maybe just because everyone else is doing it, and in a village this size, being the odd one out is a dangerous hobby. Your whole life's been wrapped in religion since birth. Baptized before you could walk, blessed by the priest before your first tooth fell out, given a saint's name to protect you from wolves, witches, and possibly rainstorms. You don't know how it works. No one does. That's why it works. After service, you bow to the crucifix. You drop a few barley kernels in the offering basket. It's not much, but God sees the gesture. The priest nods solemnly. You pretend you don't notice his boots. Leather, real leather. Probably donated. Probably not. Outside, the villagers mill around, talking in hushed tones. Someone's goat gave birth. Someone else swears the Virgin Mary appeared in a cabbageette. You're not sure how miracles work, but apparently they love vegetables. Back at home, your mother is burning rosemary, not for food, for protection. She says the scent drives out spirits. Maybe so, maybe not. The hut smells less like rot now, so you don't argue. She also mutters prayers into the fire while stirring soup. Words passed down from her mother and hers before that. Not Latin, not church-approved, but old. Older than the village. Historians still argue whether peasant religion was pure Catholicism or something messier. A stew of saints and superstitions, local legends and quiet defiance. You know it's messy. Of course it is. You cross yourself in church, but you also tie a charm to your wrist made of wool, ash and hawthorn. You whisper a prayer to Saint Apollonia when your teeth hurt, and leave out a slice of bread at night for the house spirits. Why not? It's not like you're hoarding luxuries, you're hedging bets. People talk about God's plan. You try to believe it. That your hunger, your blisters, the boil on your thigh, the frost that killed your cousin, were all written down in some divine script before you were born. That all this pain is part of something bigger, something holy. But sometimes, you're not so sure. Your neighbour Alric lost 3 children last year. He still kneels at the altar every week, still lights a candle, still sings off-key and loud. One night he told you he prays not because he trusts God, but because he wants to remind him that he's still waiting. You weren't sure if that was blasphemy or the bravest thing you'd ever heard. The priest preaches obedience. The world is broken, he says, because of sin. Your sin. Your backaches, your wormy bread, your mother's limp, all reminders that humanity is flawed, that pain is the path to salvation, that suffering is sacred. It's a hard sell, honestly. You pay tithes too. 1/10 of everything. Grain, eggs, wool. The church gets its share before you do, before your family does, before the rats, if you're lucky. You don't question it aloud, but sometimes you stare at the church's stone walls, the carved saints, the flickering candles, and you wonder what it would feel like to kneel on a warm floor. Just once. The village shares stories of saints who bled without pain, walked through fire, turned water into beer. You like that last one. Saint Bridget, they say. She once fed 100 people with 1 churn of butter. That's the kind of miracle you could use. You tried praying to her before the last harvest. The butter still ran out. You once saw a travelling monk pass through. He told tales of distant lands, deserts, golden churches, cities with walls of marble. He said there are places where peasants read books. You asked what a book was. He smiled like you'd asked what clouds taste like. He gave you a small wooden cross and told you God sees your toil. You wanted to ask if God ever saw your blisters. Sometimes you hear about hell. Not from the priest, he keeps it vague, but from stories. A pit of fire, screaming souls, boiling oil. Your neighbour claims her grandmother once saw a demon crawl out of a turnip. You don't question it. You've seen some weird turnips. There's also heaven, of course. A land of light, peace, and endless bread. Soft bread. Wheat bread. And no mud. That part alone makes you believe. You imagine it sometimes when you're weeding the Lord's barley field, your back bent like a question mark. A place with no dirt under your nails. No hunger, no rules. You try not to think about whether heaven has lords. At night, you lie in your straw bed, staring at the roof beams. The candle flickers low. Your mother snores softly. Your brother talks in his sleep. Somewhere outside, a fox yelps. You whisper a prayer, half-formed and sleepy. You don't know if it counts, but you say it anyway. Because maybe, just maybe, someone's listening. You're hauling a sack of grain on your back, knees creaking, arms trembling, and the worst part? It's not even your grain. It belongs to your Lord, the one who owns the land, the mill, the forests, the fish in the river, and, if we're being honest, a slice of your soul. Your feet squelch through the mud as you head toward the manor barn. The sack scratches your neck, heavy with this season's harvest. It's payment, not a gift. Your rent, they call it, which is a funny word considering you built your hut with your own hands and thatch you stole from his field, but sure. Rent. The Lord doesn't live like you. He sleeps on a feather bed in a stone house, drinks wine imported from somewhere with sun, and owns boots with soles thick enough to laugh at thorns. You've seen him exactly 3 times in your life. He didn't look at you any of those times. The steward is the one you actually deal with. He wears fine wool, carries a ledger, and has a face like someone who's never known back pain. You hand him your grain, he nods without smiling, marks something in his book, and waves you off like a stable boy. That's it. Months of labour, summarised in one disinterested scribble. They call it feudal obligation. Historians still argue whether medieval lords were always cruel, or if some were just generically indifferent. Either way, indifference and cruelty feel pretty similar when your pantry's empty. Every week, you owe more. Grain, eggs, firewood, labour on the demesne. That's the Lord's private land. He doesn't farm it, of course. You do. You and the rest of the village. The best fields are his. You get what's left. Rocky patches and dreams. This week it's grain. Next week it might be chickens. One time, it was a pig. You cried handing it over. Not because you're soft, but because that pig knew your name. Tithes go to the church. Taxes go to the crown. Labour goes to the Lord. Whatever's left, that's yours, assuming rats, mould, and your neighbour's hungry goat don't get to it first. But you don't complain. Well, not loudly. Complaining too loudly is how you end up losing more than grain. The steward keeps a list. You're not sure what's on it. You just know you don't want to be. You think about what it would take to be free. Not just free of labour. You'd still have to eat, after all. But free of owing. Free of bowing to someone just because their grandfather killed a guy with a fancy helmet. There's a fringe belief passed among field workers. If you run into the forest and live for a year and a day without getting caught, you become free. Some tried it. Most were found. One was eaten by a bear. Probably. His shoes turned up in a clearing. You wonder if you could make it. You've got strong legs, a decent knife, and half a loaf of barley bread. Then you remember your sister, your mother, the hut. You're not running. Not yet. Today, after paying your dues, the steward demands something extra. A day's labour repairing a fence on the manor's southern edge. You nod, because what else is there? You join 3 others, dragging timber and hammering stakes into frozen ground. You sweat and curse, and the steward watches without lifting a finger. He sips something hot from a wooden cup and mutters about lazy hands. You briefly imagine the cup falling from his lips and the contents scalding his perfectly shaved chin. The image is delicious. Almost better than dinner, which is saying something. On the way back, you pass the manor house. It looms large, 2 stories, solid stone, windows made of actual glass. You've heard rumours of rooms just for sleeping, rooms just for eating, rooms with cushions. Cushions? You've seen straw-stuffed sacks, sure, but cushions? Those are practically magic. And the food. Roasted meat, honey cakes, imported spices. You once smelled cinnamon wafting from the manor's kitchen and nearly cried. You remember the feast last spring, when the Lord married his cousin. Yes, cousin. It's a thing. You were allowed to watch the procession. The Lord's wife is said to bathe twice a week. Twice. With soap, made from olive oil. She probably thinks peasants smell like horses. She's wrong. Horses smell better. Still, you don't hate them. Not exactly. Hate takes energy. What you feel is more like resignation, with a dash of passive-aggressive loathing. The only time you saw the Lord smile was when a troubadour sang a song about the virtues of loyalty and obedience. You'd laugh too, honestly, if someone serenaded you for doing nothing. But sometimes you hear murmurs, low whispers in the tavern, over mugs of bitter ale and stale bread crusts. People saying things like, "What if the land was shared?" Or, "What if we just didn't pay?" These thoughts are dangerous. Speaking them out loud gets you watched. Acting on them gets you whipped. Or worse. Still, they're whispered. And whispers, when repeated, start to sound like something heavier. You return home late. Your arms are jelly. Your stomach is hollow. You pass your neighbour, who's pouring water into a cracked bowl. "Pay the steward?" he asks. You nod. He shakes his head slowly, then spits in the dirt. In your hut, your mother is slicing the last of the onions into the pot. You help stir. It smells sharp, warm, and slightly desperate. Your sister hums. You all sit on the floor, legs crossed, sharing what's left. Tomorrow you'll work again, and give again, and maybe, just maybe, keep enough to feel like a person. And when you lie down tonight, head resting on a burlap sack, you'll dream of something impossible. A day when no one comes to collect. You scratch at your neck and feel a familiar twitch. It's not your nerves, it's the flea. Or maybe one of a dozen, possibly 100. You've long given up counting. They live in your bedding, your clothes, your socks. Especially your socks. You're never alone. Your house is your home. You built it. Or rather, your father did. And you've been patching it together ever since with whatever wood, straw, and blind optimism you can find. It leans slightly to the left now, and if the wind hits just wrong, the entire back wall whispers soon. The walls are wattle and daub, wooden slats crisscrossed and packed with mud, straw, dung, and regrets. When it rains, and it always rains, the damp seeps into the daub and trickles down your walls in little rivulets, like tears. You sometimes name the streams, "Oh look, it's Gerald again, taking his usual path past the fire pit." The roof is thatch, dry straw bound together and stacked high. It keeps out some rain, but not all. Birds nest in it, mice run through it, and once a snake fell out of it onto your mother's shoulder. She didn't scream, she just sighed and tossed it outside like laundry. You share the house with your family, all of them. It's one room, one fire, one door. No privacy, you sleep shoulder to shoulder, head to toe, on straw-stuffed pallets or just wool blankets if you're lucky. Your little sister kicks in her sleep. Your brother snores like a dying goat. Your mother talks in her dreams and once recited an entire turnip recipe at 2 a.m. There's no chimney, so smoke from the fire drifts lazily around the room like an uninvited ghost. Your eyes sting, your clothes soak it in. You always smell faintly of burning wood and overcooked cabbage, even when you're clean. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants really lived with animals or if it's just a stereotype. You know the truth. You've shared your floor with a chicken, a lamb, and once, during a particularly cold winter, your neighbour's goat. The goat snored less than your brother. You considered making it a permanent arrangement. The pig lives outside during summer, inside during winter. It's not ideal, but pigs are warm, and you're not picky. Plus, if you talk to it gently, it doesn't squeal when you roll over at night. There's no furniture to speak of. A stool, a bench, a chest for storing everything. Your clothes, tools, dried herbs, bones of sentimental value. A shelf with wooden bowls, each cracked in a unique and emotionally significant way. Your toilet is a bucket. You take it outside when it's full, or when it starts talking back. You dig holes behind the hut when you're feeling formal. The smell? You get used to it. Sort of. Still, you keep the place clean. Not clean. Nothing here sparkles, but swept, organised, relatively free of rat drama. You hang herbs over the door to keep spirits out. They haven't worked yet, but they smell better than the goat. Your door is wooden, warped from rain, and squeals like a banshee every time it opens. You oil it with pig fat when you remember. When strangers knock, it's loud. When the wind knocks, it's louder. Outside, your world is mud. A yard, if you're being generous. A patch of grass, 2 broken tools, a bucket with a hole in it, and a fence that's more symbolic than functional. You keep chickens, or rather, you try to. They're cleverer than you'd like, and disappear regularly. You suspect your neighbour. The village itself is a cluster of homes just like yours, hunched, leaning, and vaguely apologetic looking. Smoke curls from thatched roofs, people shout at pigs, and every path is a mudslide waiting to happen. It's not pretty, it's not neat, but it's home. And yet somehow it works. You've memorized every sound your house makes. The groan of the beam when the wind shifts, the rattle of the door during storms, the peculiar pleep of water dripping into the cooking pot, The soft scurry of something alive inside the walls, probably a rat, hopefully not a ghost. You make repairs constantly, patching holes, stuffing straw into cracks, rethatching the roof with whatever straw the cows won't eat. You once used an old tunic to fill a draft near the door. It's still there. It says "Blessed be St. Balthazar" across the back. You don't remember who he is, but the wind stopped coming in, so you call it a miracle. Visitors are rare, but when they come, you tidy up. You brush the floor with a birch broom. You move the pig to the corner. You cover the worst of the leaks with spare rags. And you smile, because pride survives where comfort doesn't. And somehow, through all of this, you find joy. Laughter in the dark, warmth from shared blankets, the comfort of familiar smells, even the bad ones. You know the feel of your mother's hand on your forehead, the rhythm of your brother's sleep snorts, the exact number of creaks in the floorboards. There's a kind of poetry in it, mud-streaked, flea-bitten poetry. You lie down at night, wrapped in a blanket that's never been washed and probably never will be. You feel the fire's dying warmth on your toes. Someone is singing outside, or crying, or both. You pull the blanket over your head and let the darkness wrap around you like a second home. It's not grand, it's not quiet, but it's yours. You wake to music, sort of. It's not a harp or a choir. It's more of a wet plonk followed by a hollow cough and the unmistakable thud of someone dropping a turnip. Still, it's feast day, and that means something. It means your morning doesn't start with mud and misery, but with the tantalizing scent of, not cabbage, or at least a different kind of cabbage. Feast days are sacred. Not just in the church sense, though yes, technically you are honouring some saint whose name you don't remember and whose miracles all involved bread. But in the finally real food sense. Even the pigs look excited. Or maybe that's fear. Either way, something's different today. You sit up, brush the worst of the straw from your tunic, and join the slow parade of half-asleep villagers making their way to the communal area. Someone's built a bonfire. Someone else is roasting something that might be a goose, or a very unlucky swan. Either way, it smells divine. This is the day you've waited for. Not just a meal, but a meal. With meat and herbs, and food that's cooked for longer than 5 minutes and doesn't taste like boiled socks. Your normal diet is, let's call it humble. Barley bread, onion soup, boiled leeks, and, if you're lucky, a turnip that hasn't started fermenting on its own. But today, there's more. There's honey drizzled on apples. There's ale that isn't mostly water. There's even a meat pie, thin, scrappy, mostly crust but meat. You'd sell your remaining tooth for it. Feast days follow the church calendar. Saints, holy days, major festivals. You get dozens a year, but not all of them mean feasting. Some mean fasting, which, to be fair, you're unintentionally great at. Fasting just means same food, fewer complaints. But today's different. Today's the feast of St. Cuthbert, the patron saint of boiled eggs and mild optimism. Historians still argue whether peasants truly feasted often, or if it's an exaggerated image. But you know the truth. When you do feast, you make it count. Even if it means licking grease off your fingers and pretending you don't notice it's mutton-flavoured candle wax. There's music, too. A hurdy-gurdy wheezes out a shaky melody, while a boy beats a drum that used to be a soup pot. A girl claps along off beat. Everyone dances like their feet forgot what joy feels like, and somehow that makes it beautiful. You eat slowly, carefully. You savour. The food is hot and spiced with something exotic, pepper, maybe, or just burnt sage. You don't care. You haven't had anything that required chewing in weeks. A travelling juggler passes through. He's missing 3 teeth, but balances knives like a man blessed by St. Vitus himself. You applaud. You even laugh. It's the first time in days your face doesn't feel like wet cloth. You meet eyes with a girl across the fire. She's laughing too, holding a skewer of meat and smiling like her heart doesn't ache every morning. You want to say something. You don't. You just nod. She nods back. That's enough for now. Someone brings out cheese. Cheese. You'd heard rumours. It smells like feet, but in the best way. A tiny wedge is passed around like a relic. You nibble it and forget, briefly, that your shoes are made of stitched bark and prayer. Then come the stories. Old tales of saints who turned fish into wine, or monks who danced with angels disguised as pigs. One man claims he saw a star fall from the sky and land in a field, blessing the wheat. You know it was just lightning, but you let him have the moment. You tell a story, too, about the time your brother ate a candle thinking it was a meat roll. The crowd laughs. He doesn't. Then comes the drinking. The ale is strong enough to kill weak thoughts. People sing louder, dance harder. Someone tries to jump over the fire. They don't quite make it. You help them up. They're fine, a little scorched, but fine. You know it won't last. You know tomorrow you'll be back in the fields, scraping mud from your boots and praying your turnip crop hasn't been cursed by a jealous neighbour. But tonight, you eat until your belly groans and your face hurts from smiling. A little girl dances with a chicken. An old man sings a hymn in a key no human should attempt. The stars blink down on you through breaks in the clouds. Someone passes you another slice of pie. You don't ask what's in it. You don't care. As the fire burns low, you sit on a worn log, legs stretched, belly full, eyes heavy. You hear a flute somewhere, or maybe it's just the wind. People yawn. The night grows softer. You think of all the other feast days to come, the fasting days too. But right now, it's all simple. Food, fire, warmth, and the soft shuffle of feet against packed dirt. You haven't been this full in months. You might not be again for months more, but right now you are. And it feels like a miracle. The scent hits you first. Warm, pungent, undeniably cabbage. It wafts from a pot that's been bubbling over the hearth since sunrise, bubbling like it has secrets and none of them are good. You're not surprised. Cabbage is the third member of every medieval marriage. You, your spouse, and the everlasting stench of boiled brassica. Today's a big day. There's talk of a marriage in the village. Not yours, thanks St. Whoever. But someone's cousin's son is tying the knot with someone's sister's niece. And that means you're about to witness the rarest thing in peasant life, romance that hasn't yet been smothered by mildew and mortgages. You remember your own wedding. Or at least, you remember the parts that weren't overshadowed by the pig escaping from under the trestle table. It was simple. You said your vows before the priest, you shared bread and ale, and you danced. There was no ring, no white dress, just two people agreeing not to die alone, and to share what little they had, including fleas, bed space, and turnips. If that's not love, what is? Your spouse, call them what you will, wife, husband, life's co-labourer, is asleep on the pallet when you stir. Hair everywhere, one sock on, snoring like a bag of gravel in a windstorm, and yet you smile. Not because life is perfect, but because somehow, despite the dirt, the famine, the mystery boils and the... Historians still argue whether love played any role in medieval marriages. Most were arranged, practical, economic decisions. But you know the truth. Love might not start things, but it grows, quietly, like moss on a cold wall. It sneaks in during shared chores, hushed jokes, and a warm hand on a cold night. The village wedding is modest. The couple stands in their best tunics, meaning only slightly patched. The bride has flowers in her hair that were, moments ago, growing beside the latrine, but who's judging? The priest mumbles the blessing, a chicken clucks right on cue. Everyone cheers. Then come the gifts. A loaf of bread, a clay jug. Someone gives them a very judgmental goat. You suspect it will outlive the marriage. You eat cabbage stew with everyone. Again. You're not mad, it's hot and filling and someone added garlic. That's basically luxury. You sit beside your spouse, you share a bowl, you both wince at the same sour note, you laugh. Later, there's dancing. A circle forms. Someone brings out a fiddle that's missing 2 strings. A drum appears, an actual drum, not a bucket, and people stomp in rhythm, mostly. You watch as the newlyweds attempt something that might be a panic attack. In your world, love is a small, stubborn thing. It shows itself not in grand gestures, but in the way someone shares their last bit of cheese, or doesn't complain when you burn the barley bread again. It's carrying water together. It's stitching your name into a blanket. It's not minding the smell because, honestly, you smell the same. Not that marriage is always gentle. You fought. Over chores. Over who forgot to bar the door. Over whose turn it was to empty the chamber pot. Once, over a spoon. A single wooden spoon. It was an intense afternoon. But you've also watched your partner pick lice from your hair with the concentration of a scholar. That's intimacy. That's trust. Love with fewer poems and more scratching. There's the matter of children, too. Some couples have many, some lose many. It's a cruel math. You've held a baby wrapped in nothing but linen and hope. You've buried another with nothing more than a prayer and a handful of flowers. Life and death walk hand in hand here, and marriage is the tightrope strung between them. You've seen marriages that never soften, just two people aging next to each other like stones. You've seen others where affection blossoms slowly, shyly, like a dandelion between paving stones. Your own? Somewhere in the middle, not perfect, not terrible. Real. You remember the first time your partner smiled at you for no reason. Not because you'd done something useful, not because you hadn't spilled the soup, but just smiled. It felt like being handed the last plum and realizing it was sweeter than you expected. There are no love letters here, no serenades, no Valentine's Day, just small, consistent gestures, patching someone's tunic before they ask, leaving the warm spot by the fire for them, sharing the better part of the stew. Your neighbours Gilda and Tom have been together for 30 years. That's older than most people get. She calls him Mule. He calls her Thorn. And yet, every morning they walk to the well together, grumbling in perfect rhythm. That's the dream. Later that evening, the newlyweds sneak away to their new hut. Bare walls, one bed, no door yet. Someone throws flower petals after them. Someone else throws cabbage. It's hard to tell which was planned. Back in your own hut, you settle into your corner. Your spouse stretches beside you, muttering about their sore back and your cold feet. You grin and press your toes against them anyway. The fire flickers. The stew pot is empty. The room smells like garlic and damp linen. Someone outside is still singing, slightly off key. You curl close. You whisper something silly. They laugh. In a world where you own nothing, not the land, not your body, not even your time, this small, messy, cabbage-scented love is yours. And that is enough. You wake up with a sharp, aching pulse in your jaw. Again. It's the third morning this week. Your tooth, the one in the back, the one you chew the least offensive corner of barley bread with, is staging a slow, steady rebellion. And to be honest, you're starting to lose. Your fingers are already at your cheek, probing gently, praying it's just sore from sleeping wrong. But no, that tooth is angry, swollen, hot. Your breath tastes like boiled turnips and regret. And the worst part? You know exactly what's coming. Tooth pain in your world isn't just annoying, it's existential. There are no dentists, no soothing mouth rinses, no numbing gels. There's you, a few herbs, and a neighbour with a strong arm and questionable aim. You've tried everything, chewing willow bark, rubbing garlic on your gums, whispering to St. Apollonia, the patron of teeth apparently. Someone even told you to pee on a thistle at dawn and recite your name backwards. You did it. No shame. Still hurts. Historians still argue whether medieval people actually lost all their teeth by their 20s, or if it just felt that way. You're not a scholar, but your mouth has 4 teeth less than last year, so you have thoughts. Your smile is, shall we say, unique. A few teeth lean like they're tired. One is missing entirely, the space filled with the occasional bit of food or stray word. Your spouse says it gives you character. You say it gives you soup leakage. And it's not just teeth. Your body in general is functional. Mostly. You smell. Constantly. You bathe once a week, if the weather's good and you're feeling bold. Bathing means hauling water, heating it, and risking hypothermia. You emerge with cleaner skin and 3 new leeches. One tried to live in your ear. Your soap is made of animal fat and ash. It works, sort of. It also smells like old boots and leaves your skin feeling like dried parchment. Still, it beats the alternative, letting the sweat stew. Your armpits are not great. No one's are. The entire village has accepted that body odour is simply part of life. If you smell like cabbage and feet, congratulations, you're alive. Perfume? That's for nobles. You once smelled lavender on a passing merchant's sleeve and nearly passed out from the shock. The memory still haunts you. Your clothes don't help. They're wool, thick, and rarely washed. You sleep in them, work in them, get buried in them. They itch, they chafe, and they carry every smell you've ever met, including some you'd rather forget. Then there's your feet. You don't talk about your feet. No one does. They're calloused, cracked, and vaguely purple in the winter. Your boots are hand-downs that weren't new in your grandfather's time. You patch the holes with twine and desperation. Sometimes you step on something sharp and don't feel it until you sit down later and find the blood. Your hands are worse. Blistered, cut, stained with soil and soot. The nails are uneven, broken, sometimes black. You've got a splinter you've named. You greet it every morning. Morning herald. And yet somehow, you're fine. Mostly. You're a functioning organism, albeit one that could be used to ward off wild animals if you stood still too long. Let's go back to that tooth. Eventually, the pain wins. You go to Auntie Mirren again. She taps the tooth with a wooden stick. You scream. She nods. Rotten. Helpful. She offers 2 solutions. One involves clove oil and prayers. The other involves a spoon and a friend to hold you down. You choose the second. You're not brave, but you are desperate. The extraction is exactly as bad as you expect. There's blood. There's screaming. There's laughter from your friend who swears he's helping. But eventually, the tooth is out. You hold it in your hand like a war trophy. You cry. Not because of the pain, but because it's finally over. You spend the next 3 days sipping warm broth and questioning every life choice that led you here. But hey, the pain's gone. Mostly. And your smile has one more gap, which is basically standard now. There's a fringe remedy someone mentions in passing. Burning the root of a yarrow plant and waving it near your face. You try it. All it does is make your nose itch. But again, you're at the might as well stage of hygiene. On rare occasions, someone comes back from the city talking about public bathhouses. Rooms filled with hot water, steam, and people who willingly wash. You squint at the idea. It sounds suspiciously luxurious. You imagine slipping into warm water without needing to melt snow first. It makes you tear up a little. Meanwhile, back in your hut, you rinse your mouth with warm ale and breathe through your nose. Your breath still smells like despair, but at least the sharp edge is gone. You lie down next to your spouse. They roll over, sniff once, and mumble, better. You take it as a compliment. Because in a world of endless work, endless aches, and endless smells, you'll take what you can get. You wake with your knees drawn up to your chest, trying to pretend the cold isn't gnawing its way through your bones like a determined weasel. The fire's long since gone out. Your breath fogs the air. Your blanket is damp. You pull it tighter anyway, knowing it won't help, but it gives your hands something to do besides shivering. Outside, the wind howls. Not in a poetic, moody way, in the we may not survive the week way. It sneaks through cracks in the dark walls and whistles across your floor like it's trying to take something with it. Probably your last shred of optimism. Winter's come hard this year, again. The sky's been low and grey for weeks, like it's sulking, and your world has turned to slush, ice, and something that used to be mud but now just feels like punishment. The food stores are nearly gone, the grain sacks are sagging, the onions have turned soft and started to grow hair, even the rats have stopped showing up. You'd almost welcome them now, if just to know someone's eating. You trudge to the granary and scoop what's left: barley dust, a few dried peas, and a beet that looks like it gave up. Your mother says she'll make soup. You believe her. You just wish she wouldn't call it that. Hot water with ambition would be more accurate. You remember last winter? That one hit even harder. You were so hungry you chewed the bark off a tree. Your teeth haven't been right since. A neighbour cooked his boots. The tannin made him sick. He said it was still worth it. Famine isn't dramatic here. It doesn't swoop in with thunder and lightning. It drifts in slowly, like fog, and settles in your belly, turning every meal into a game of how long can I make this last? Historians still argue whether peasant famine was truly as constant as records suggest, or just more visible in the worst decades. You don't need a scholar's opinion. You've lived it. You're living it. You remember harvests that looked good, full fields, heavy with grain, hope in every stalk. But then came the rains, or a sudden frost, or a plague of insects, or mould. Always something. One bad week and the whole season's lost. And when the harvest fails, everything else fails with it. There's no safety net, no backup pantry, no mysterious barn full of secret snacks. You eat what you've grown. If you haven't grown it, you trade. If you can't trade, you pray. And if that fails, well, there's always boiled nettles and the bitter taste of resignation. You try to stretch meals, thin the porridge with water, ration bread so everyone gets a slice the width of a playing card. Sometimes you skip meals and tell your little sister you're just not hungry. She doesn't believe you, but she eats the extra anyway. You're proud of her for that. Tonight's dinner is root soup, mostly water, with a few slivers of parsnip and something you hope isn't mould. You chew slowly, savour the texture, try to trick your stomach into thinking it's full. It's not. It knows. It growls at you all night like a dog left outside in the snow. Your neighbour's sheep died yesterday. Old age, maybe, or just gave up. You helped skin it. The meat was tough, stringy, but warm. You shared it between 4 families. It lasted less than a day. You hear stories, always from someone who knows someone who knows someone, about villages where people went darker, about soup that didn't come from any animal you'd want to name. You don't believe them, but sometimes, when the fire dies low and your stomach twists like a rope, you wonder. There's a fringe cure passed around for hunger. Swallow 3 stones before sunrise and recite a blessing. It's said to fool your body into thinking it's eaten. You tried it once. All you got was a chipped tooth and a sore throat. Even the dogs look thinner now. And meaner. You avoid eye contact. You're not sure which of you would win in a fight. It'd be close. The children don't play much anymore. They sit near the fire, hollow-eyed and silent. Their cheeks are red from cold, not laughter. You give them stories instead of snacks. Tales of brave knights who found enchanted bread trees. They listen. They know it's fiction, but the hunger quiets for a little while. That's all you need. Your mother tells you to sleep early. The less you move, the less you burn. You lie down, stomach empty, muscles weak. You dream of apples. Huge, golden, impossible apples that drip with honey. You bite into one and wake up chewing your blanket. The cold presses in harder as night falls. You curl tighter. Your sister's hand finds yours. She squeezes. You squeeze back. Outside, the wind howls louder. You whisper a blessing to the trees, to the roof, to the fire that still sputters in the hearth. You tell yourself that spring will come, that it always comes, even if it's late, even if it's weak, even if it arrives with mud and mould and the faintest whisper of warmth, because all you need is enough. Just enough to last until green things grow again. Just enough to wake up tomorrow. The wind's eased off today, but no one's celebrating. It's too quiet. You're used to sound, even the bad kind. Creaking rafters, hungry dogs, a neighbour arguing with his wife over whether St. Peter can hear them better if they yell. But this silence, it's unsettling, like the whole village is holding its breath. You pull on your boots, still damp, always damp, and step outside. The frost crunches beneath your feet. There's a new mark carved into the lintel of your neighbour's door. A kind of swirl, hastily scratched, probably with a knife. You squint. It wasn't there yesterday. Your gut tightens. Superstition runs thick here, like smoke from wet wood. It seeps into everything. You don't call it magic, not unless you want a lecture from the priest. It's just the way things are. Everyone has a charm. Everyone knows someone who saw a ghost. You've heard stories of spirits living in wells and old trees. You've whispered, "Stay away," to a shadow before crossing a bridge, just in case. Today, you pass the widow Matilda, crouched near the hedgerow, burying something small wrapped in cloth. She looks up, catches your eye, and offers no explanation. You nod. She nods. Some things don't require words. Probably a protection bundle, or a curse, or both. Who's to say? You've never seen a ghost yourself, but you felt something. That night, 2 winters ago, when the fire blew sideways and your breath turned icy despite the heat. That wasn't just wind. You still sleep with a dried fennel stalk under your pillow. For protection, for dreams, for peace. Children grow up fast here, mostly because childhood is short. They learn early that the woods are dangerous, not just because of wolves or bandits, but things. Shapes seen from the corner of your eye, sounds that don't belong, whispers that repeat your name when no one else is near. Historians still argue whether medieval superstitions were remnants of older pagan faiths, or just the desperate logic of people trying to survive. You don't argue, you just knock on wood and tie red string around your wrists during storms. Your hut is full of these protections. A bundle of rowan twigs above the door. An iron nail driven into the threshold. Ash under the bed. Every item chosen for a reason. You don't remember them all, but you don't question them. You can't afford to. And then there's the wind. Locals call it Satan's breath. When it whistles low and warm through the village, people stay inside. Doors are barred, fires are smothered. You clutch your blanket and pray. It's said the wind carries spirits, wandering souls looking for a door left ajar or a heart cracked just enough to slip into. Last year, a boy disappeared during one of those winds. Left his bed, vanished. The only thing found was a single muddy footprint leading toward the forest. No one speaks his name now. It's safer not to. That same forest, it's a tangle of branches, shadows, and superstition. You only enter when you must. Gathering, hunting, the occasional escape. But even then, you avoid the glade with the standing stones. You don't touch the twisted tree. You don't step where the moss grows red. Not unless you want to go missing. A travelling friar once warned you that fear is the devil's playground. You listened politely, nodded, and then hid your St. Bridget's cross under your tunic. It's made of rushes, dried and woven. It keeps nightmares away. Mostly. There are cures and counter-charms for everything. Boils, rub them with black bread and bury it under a crossroads. Night terrors, hang a knife above your bed, point down. Unexplained illness, find the evil eye and spit near it. 3 times, not 2. 2 is unlucky. Everyone knows that. You remember the time the baker's daughter fell into a fever. Nothing worked. Not prayers, not leeches, not Auntie Mirren's questionable tea. So they brought in a wise woman from the next village. She burned feathers in a clay bowl and muttered in a language no one recognized. The girl recovered 2 days later. Coincidence? Maybe. No one's willing to test it. Today, a cow refuses to leave its pen, stares at the woods, lowers its head. That's enough to cancel afternoon chores. You join the others by the fire, pretending not to notice the way your hands keep making the sign of the cross. There's also talk of witches. No one says the word directly, of course. Too dangerous, too sticky. But the signs are familiar. Milk that curdles too fast, bread that won't rise, a child who speaks in tongues, the midwife who lives alone and wears too many beads. You've seen what happens when suspicion takes root. 2 summers ago, an old woman was accused. She didn't scream, She didn't run. She just stood there, staring, as the villagers argued whether ducking her in the river or weighing her against a sack of flour was more effective. In the end, she left, vanished into the woods. Some say she turned into a crow. You've never looked one in the eye since. Tonight, the sky is oddly clear. Stars blink overhead like they're watching. You build up the fire, just in case. You scatter salt in a circle near the hearth. You spit on the threshold, once for luck, twice for protection. You don't sleep. Not yet. The wind changes. You hear a whisper. Or maybe it's just the straw settling. But still, you clutch your charm tighter and close your eyes. Because here, where the dark is deeper and the story's older, superstition isn't weakness. It's survival. The road out of your village is more of a suggestion than a surface. A muddy vein that coils past fields, through the edge of the woods, and towards somewhere that isn't here. You rarely walk it. No one does, unless they have to. Because travel, in your world, is not adventure. It's risk. And more often than not, it's regret. Still, there are days, like today, when you're sent out. The steward needs a message delivered to the next village over. It's a 2-hour walk if the road's dry, 3 if it's wet, and forever if the sky decides to punish you again. You sigh, pull on your patched boots, and start trudging. The mud slurps at your feet with each step. Every puddle hides a surprise. Sharp rock, decaying root, or what you hope is just manure. You pass a wagon wheel half sunk in the muck, abandoned since last harvest. It's grown moss now. It belongs to the road. You don't travel alone, of course. That'd be madness. You walk with Hal, who carries a knife too small to matter, and a confidence too big to fit his hat. He hums while he walks. You've never liked that about him. The woods edge close on either side. Thin trees, crooked trunks, branches that claw at the sky like they're trying to escape the dirt. You know these woods. You've foraged here, cut firewood, hid once, during a thunderstorm. But you also know the stories. Bandits, for one. Real ones. Not the storybook kind with noble causes and capes, but the hungry, cold, desperate ones with clubs and bad teeth. They don't want your coin. You have none. They want your boots, your food, your time. Once a girl from the next village returned barefoot, shaking, silent. Her hair had been cut off. No one asked why. Then there are the wolves. You hear them at night, howling. You've never seen one, not properly, but you've seen the aftermath. A lamb torn open, feathers scattered like snow. They don't hunt often, but when they do, they don't miss. Hal jokes about them. Says he'd wrestle a wolf if it came to it. You nod politely, mentally subtracting him from your list of reliable travelling companions. But it's not just bandits and beasts you fear. It's the road itself, the way it changes, the way it forgets you. You've heard tales of travellers stepping off the path and never coming back, of crossroads that don't lead where they should, of stones that hum at night. You've heard them. Everyone has. Historians still argue whether medieval people truly feared the landscape or just respected it deeply. There's a stone just past the stream. You've passed it 100 times, flat, covered in lichen, shaped suspiciously like a crouching man. Some say it is a man, turned to stone for cursing a priest. You touch your charm as you pass. The wind picks up, the trees shiver. Hal stops humming. You come across a cart abandoned on the side of the road. One wheel snapped, the harness frayed. No horse, no goods, no sign of struggle, just empty. You don't linger. You don't want to know the story behind it. Some things are meant to be forgotten. You pass a bridge, a narrow plank over a sluggish stream. Hal crosses first. You follow, heart thumping. The wood creaks under your weight. You look down. Something dark swims under the water. Or maybe it's your reflection. You don't look again. And then, finally, the other village. It's much like yours. Thatched roofs, smoke curling from chimneys, people bent over chores with that same mixture of exhaustion and suspicion. You deliver the message. A nod. A coin you won't keep. You don't ask what the message was. You're not supposed to know. You rest a moment near the well. The water here tastes different, cleaner. Maybe it's your imagination. A boy offers you a slice of onion. You take it. It burns your mouth and clears your sinuses. You thank him like he gave you gold. Hal flirts with a girl who sells rushes. She ignores him expertly. You pretend not to watch. The way back is harder. The light fades. The wind returns. The road feels longer than it should. You're not sure if it's the cold, or the silence, or something else, but your stomach tightens as you re-enter the woods. A branch snaps. You freeze. Hal laughs. "Squirrel," he says. You don't respond. You walk faster. And then, without warning, the path splits. You've walked this road a dozen times, maybe more, but this fork? This wasn't here. Hal frowns. Left? You shake your head. Right. Neither of you is sure. You choose right. You walk for 10 minutes. Nothing looks familiar. The trees are too tall, the shadows too thick, the silence too loud. You see a figure up ahead, hooded, still, standing right in the middle of the path. You stop. They don't move. You turn around. You go back. You take the other path. You don't talk for the rest of the walk. By the time you reach your village, night has swallowed the sky. The firelight from your hut feels like salvation. You crawl inside. You pull the blanket over your head. You don't tell anyone about the fork or the figure. You just lie there, listening to the wind outside, hoping it doesn't knock. You're shoveling manure when the rumour reaches you. As usual. You'd think the universe would wait until you were holding something less smelly, but no, that's not how peasant news works. Your neighbour Ambrose, who hears everything before it's worth hearing, leans on the fence with a sly grin. They're saying the king's tacksmen got chased out of Craybridge, with sticks. You straighten up slowly, not because you're shocked, but because your back's already sore. He nods. They didn't even get the grain. Someone threw a beehive. You pause. That actually happened. He shrugs. Probably not. But someone wants it to have happened. That's nearly the same thing. That's how it always starts, with whispers, with stories wrapped in jokes. Someone said something, somewhere, and now the wind's carrying it into your ears while you're ankle-deep in cow dung. But this rumour has teeth. You can feel it. By the end of the day, the whispers have names. Jack Straw, Wat Tyler. Names that sound like they belong to people with strong arms and nothing left to lose. You ask someone what they did. They stood up, comes the answer. You don't ask against whom. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were naturally rebellious or only pushed to revolt by desperation. You could have saved them the trouble. The answer is yes. Always yes. It's just a question of how long people will bow before their backs finally snap. You hear more in the tavern. Someone from the next town over says the king's men burned a village that refused to pay taxes. Someone else says the lords are panicking, building up militias. Someone claims they saw a peasant army, an army, marching down the road, barefoot but furious. Someone else swears they saw a chicken reading a prophecy. But that's probably the ale talking. Still, the energy shifts. You feel it in your bones. In the way people glance over their shoulders. In the way they sharpen tools a little slower, a little more carefully. In the way Auntie Mirren suddenly starts saving herbs with names like Battle Balm. The Lord Steward seems nervous now. He rides through the village twice as often, but speaks half as much. His eyes dart. His boots are muddier. He doesn't look at anyone too long. One morning, he posts a notice on the tavern wall. You can't read it. Few can, but the symbols are enough. It's a warning. And warnings are just invitations dressed as threats. Hal, always ready to talk big, leans in. They're scared, he says. They know we're watching. You raise an eyebrow. We? He grins. Well, eventually. Another rumour. A priest in a nearby town gave a sermon that said all men are equal under God. Said lords and kings were no closer to heaven than a peasant with clean hands and a clear conscience. Said those who toil in the dirt deserve more than crumbs. He was arrested 2 days later. But the words stuck. They show up in whispers, in songs, in chalk scratched on stone. When Adam delved and Eve span, who was then the gentleman? You hear it once, then twice, then every day. It's catchy, it's dangerous. It's true. You start to look at things differently. The grain you carry to the manor barn feels heavier now. The mud on your boots feels more like chains. You see the fine coat on the steward's shoulders and imagine how it would look soaked in manure. There's a fringe tale about a peasant who broke into a noble's home, sat in his chair, drank his wine, and declared himself king for an hour. They say he laughed the whole time until the guards arrived. You like that story more than you should. And then it happens. A group of men, 20, maybe more, pass through the village. They're not soldiers, but they march like it. Eyes forward, backs straight. One carries a flag, a black cloth with a red hand painted on it. It's crude, but bold. They don't stop. They don't ask permission. Someone tosses them a piece of bread. They nod. That's all. You watch them disappear down the road, toward the manor. You feel something strange rise in your chest. Not fear. Not hope. Something heavier, older. The next day the steward is gone. No one says what happened. No one asks. You don't see the Lord for weeks. He doesn't return. Maybe he fled. Maybe he's hiding behind stone walls, counting coins and sweating in his fancy robe. Maybe it doesn't matter. Because suddenly the rules are bending. Someone suggests redistributing the land. Someone else says, why not? You don't cheer, you don't shout, but you think. That night, you sharpen your hoe. Not for farming, just in case. The wind carries more whispers now. They drift in through the cracks in your hut like cold air. People talk about justice, about fairness, about taking what's owed. You don't know what's coming. But for the first time in your life you think, maybe, it might not be more of the same. The hoe in your hand feels heavier today, not from weight, but from meaning. It's still the same tool, cracked at the handle, iron blade rusting at the corners. But something's different. Or maybe you're different. You glance at it before swinging down into the dirt. Just farming, you remind yourself, for now. The field is damp, reluctant, and quiet. You're back on your family's strip of land, planting barley in rows that vanish into the mist. Same as always. Work hasn't stopped. Not after the whispers, not after the passing marches, not even after the steward vanished like mist before sunrise. The crop still needs sowing, the earth still needs coaxing, your stomach still needs feeding. This is your rhythm. It's the rhythm of every day, every season, every year. You rise, you work, you pray, you sleep, you repeat. Historians still argue whether peasants were truly shackled to routine, or if they embraced it as survival. The answer is yes. Yes, you're stuck, and yes, you've made peace with it. What else is there? The rooster crows late, the lazy fool. The air smells of damp soil and something slightly sour, last week's compost. You shoulder your hoe and bend again, carving narrow trenches into the earth for seed. Your knees complain, your back mutters threats. You ignore them both. The church bell rings faintly in the distance. Morning prayers. You mouth a few words out of habit, not for blessings, those are in short supply, but to keep yourself aligned. If you don't say something every day, the silence creeps in. You're joined by others. Hal, whistling tunelessly. Moretta, already sweating under her bonnet. Even Auntie Mirren's out, gathering weeds that might be medicinal or might be salad. Everyone's working. You'd think they'd stop. That maybe, after everything, people would pause, rebel, run. But the earth doesn't stop needing you just because you're angry at the system. You work through mid-morning. The sun teases you with occasional bursts through the clouds, but mostly it hides, like it owes you something. You stop once to drink from a wooden cup. It tastes like lukewarm moss. Still better than the ale from last week's barrel, which had gone fully sentient. You think back to the dream you had last night, a strange one, dancing in a room full of bread. Warm bread, wheat bread. You could smell it, feel it. You woke up chewing the edge of your blanket again. Third time this month. Your routine continues. You turn the soil. You scatter seed. You cover it with your boot. You mutter a little rhyme your grandmother used to say. One for the birds, one for the sky. One for the rain, and one to die. No idea what it means, but the rhythm helps. Lunchtime comes. You sit under a tree with a slab of cold porridge wrapped in cloth. It's solid enough to double as a tool. You gnaw it slowly, watching a line of ants make their way across your foot. You don't bother moving. Let them inspect. There's nothing of value here. Moretta joins you, sits with a grunt. Back's a mess, she says. You nod. Everything's a mess. She chews quietly for a minute, then says, "Think they'll come back?" You know who she means. The taxmen, the lords, the old rules. Maybe, you say. Maybe not. She nods like that's enough. And for now, it is. After lunch, it's more of the same. You repair a fence post, chase a goose out of the lettuce, and chase Hal after he chases the goose. He nearly slips and dies, and you laugh so hard you forget, briefly, how miserable you are. That's the thing about routine. It's not just survival, it's distraction. It gives your body something to do so your mind doesn't scream too loud. You worry, of course, about next month's harvest, about your sister's cough, about that weird mole on your arm. But while you're digging, you can forget, for a while. There's a fringe belief that if you stop working during certain moon phases, the crops die out of spite. You don't believe it, but you still glance at the sky before planting anything. Just in case. Evening comes like spilled ink. The sky turns purple, then blue, then nothing. You gather your tools, wipe your hands on your tunic, and shuffle home. Your boots are soaked, your feet are screaming. You want dinner, you'll get soup. The fire in the hearth is burned low, but the hut is warm with bodies and steam. Your mother's stirring something thick in a pot, cabbage maybe, or sadness. Your brother's mending a sock. Your sister's drawing something in ash on the wall. A flower, or possibly a goat. Either way, it's better than more news. You eat, slowly, carefully. You taste each bite like it's your last, even though you know it probably won't be. Not yet. And then it's time for evening prayers. You kneel. You cross yourself. You whisper. Not for forgiveness. Not for miracles. Just to keep the rhythm. Work. Prayer. Repeat. That's the melody of your life. Some days it sings. Some days it growls. But it always goes on. And as you lie in the dark, eyes heavy, belly half full, you let the repetition carry you. Because when everything is uncertain, even the routine becomes holy. You're awake before the rooster. Again. You lie there listening to your little sister snore, and wonder when that became a comfort instead of a curse. The fire has died, the hut is cold, and the sky outside the cracks in the wall is the colour of unbaked bread. Another day, another start, another survival attempt. You roll over and wince. Your shoulder aches from yesterday's digging. Your knees feel like they've been swapped with someone 3 times your age. You sit up slowly, brush straw from your tunic, and immediately get a face full of spiderweb. You don't even flinch anymore. That's how it is. And you're only 23. Childhood here isn't a phase, it's a test. A very short one, with very long consequences. If you survive to 5, you're lucky. If you survive to 10, you're already working. And if you make it to 15, people start asking why you're not married and why your goat hasn't had kids yet. No one's patient here. Even time moves with a limp. You remember being 6 and carrying water. Not a little cup. A full bucket, almost as big as your torso, slushing with every step. You spilled it once. You cried, not because you got scolded, but because you had to go back and do it again. Historians still argue about how childhood was defined in the Middle Ages. Some say children were treated as miniature adults. Others insist families cherished and protected them. You think both are true. You were loved, sure, but you still had to weed turnip fields before you had all your teeth. There's no school, of course. Not unless you count the occasional travelling monk teaching letters in exchange for eggs and awkward eye contact. You don't know how to write, but you know the stars. You know which mushrooms are safe and which ones make your cousin think he's a duck. You know the sound a storm makes before it floods the creek. You learned those things before your 8th birthday. By 10, you were cooking porridge and chasing off crows. By 12, you were helping the blacksmith. You remember the heat, the smell of singed hair, the moment you realized your eyebrows were never going to grow back evenly. At 13, your friend Anna got married. She didn't cry. She just blinked a lot. You were still climbing trees. She was learning to manage a hearth and not burn the stew. And now? Now you're grown. At least, that's what they say. You've got your own chores, your own tools, your own scars. You've buried playthings, literally. Your favourite carved goat broke and you held a little ceremony behind the hut. You were 9. It was touching. No one showed up. Children are everywhere, of course. The village overflows with them. Mud-streaked, sharp-eyed, loud. They're small enough to slip between fence posts and fast enough to steal apples before you notice. But they know better than to waste time. You watch your little brother play with a stick and a stone. He's pretending it's a sword and a dragon. He'll grow out of that. Next year, probably. Once he starts working the fields full-time. You feel a pang. You don't stop him, though. Let him fight his imaginary dragon while he still can. There's a fringe belief that children can see spirits more easily than adults. That they're still close to the other world, still tuned to something old and invisible. You've seen your sister stare at corners and giggle for no reason. You never ask who she's talking to. Life expectancy here is low. You know that. Not in numbers. No one's counting birthdays. But in funerals. You've lost siblings, friends, a girl who used to give you wildflowers and call you Big Nose. You miss her more than you'd admit. Death isn't shocking anymore. It's just expected. When someone coughs too long, you start saving linen for wrapping. When a baby's born, you wait 3 days before getting attached. That sounds cruel. It isn't. It's just realistic. But when children do make it, when they grow past the sickly stages and the winter hunger and the weird rash no one can name, it's a miracle. You celebrate quietly. An extra scoop of broth, a whispered thank you, a carved charm tucked under a blanket. Your sister is 10 now. She has all her fingers. She can outrun the dog. You're cautiously hopeful. She's clever, too. Said the moon looks like God's dirty spoon the other night. You snorted so hard you dropped your spoon into the fire. Worth it. There's no ceremony for growing up, no party, no candle-lit rite of passage. You just wake up one day and realize your games are gone. Your fingers are calloused, your eyes don't sparkle, they squint. You've inherited your father's tasks, his tools, his debts, unofficial though they are, and maybe, if you're lucky, his spot by the fire. He passed last year, quietly. Just stopped breathing one night. You buried him with his best boots. It felt right. Tonight, you sit by the hearth with your siblings. The pot is full of something edible, and everyone's in a good mood. Someone makes a joke. Someone else sings. Your sister braids straw into a circle and says it's a crown. She puts it on your head. "You're the king now," she says. You smile. "Does that mean I get out of chores?" She blinks. "No." Fair enough. You lie down on your straw pallet and think about those who never made it this far. The ones who didn't reach 12, 15, 20. You feel guilty for a moment, then grateful, then tired. You close your eyes. And for once, you dream of something peaceful. You wake up to the sound of shouting and sloshing. Festival days are rare, joy rarer. But when they come, you squeeze every last drop of silly out of them before the grind swallows you back. Today's in honour of St. Mildred, patron of headaches and swans. No one really remembers why, but there's a carved wooden duck wearing a crown tied to the well. And that's close enough. You've been to these before. They're muddy, chaotic, loud, and absolutely necessary. They give people a reason to scrub their faces, wear their best tunics, and lie about how good their turnip harvest was, which is basically the medieval version of Instagram. Your tunic smells slightly less awful than usual, so you throw it on and join the crowd. The village green, if you can call a square patch of churned-up dirt and trampled herbs a green, is already alive with activity. Someone's roasting something on a spit. It might be a chicken, might be a particularly plump squirrel. You choose not to ask. There's music too. A fiddler with 3 working strings, a boy hitting a pot with a spoon, and a woman whose voice could probably curdle milk, but in a good way. You find yourself swaying before you even mean to. That's the point. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants had time for real celebration, or if it was all toil, tears, and taxes. You could answer that in your sleep. You celebrate because of the toil. It's the only way you stay sane. You grab a mug of weak ale. Watery, yes, but cold and fizzy. And toast nothing in particular. Hal appears beside you with his usual swagger and a flower crown too small for his head. "I'm St. Mildred," he announces. "Kiss my duck." You ignore him. A group of children races past, covered in mud and chasing a pig painted blue. You hope that's paint. Probably. Maybe. There's a contest starting. Who can eat the most leeks without crying? You passed. You learned your lesson last year. Your intestines still haven't forgiven you. You watch as the local fool, yes, there's an official one, dances into the crowd wearing a tunic made of rags and a hat with what might be a dead crow on it. He tells riddles, juggles eggs, badly, and loudly accuses the baker of stealing yeast from the heavens. Everyone laughs, including the baker. Then someone produces a goat skull on a stick. That's the mummer's totem, a ritual puppet, worn and patched, but sacred to this particular celebration. Its jaw is articulated, and it clacks as people chant around it. You join in. You don't know the words exactly, but neither does anyone else. The goat understands. Later, there's a play. Local, improvised, and performed entirely by people who have no right being on a stage. It tells the story of a nobleman who's cursed to live as a goose until he learns humility. There's a lot of honking. The moral is unclear, but you laugh until your ribs hurt. There's also dancing. Not graceful court dancing like nobles do. No silk shoes and gliding across polished floors. This is stumping, clapping, spinning until you fall down dancing. Dirt kicks up. Someone trips over the fiddler. Someone else proposes marriage to a barrel. You join the line, hands clasped with people you've known your whole life and people you forgot you liked. The sun dips low. The sky turns gold and orange. You sit on a bench beside your mother, sharing a piece of bread with actual herbs baked into it. A rare treat. She smiles at you. You smile back. You say nothing. You don't need to. Nearby, your sister is covered in face paint and declaring herself Queen of the Worms. Someone curtsies. There's a tradition during festivals where people trade roles for a few hours. Peasants pretend to be lords. Children command adults. The fool becomes king. It's symbolic, of course. No one's really in charge. But it's the one time you get to feel what it's like to sit on the imaginary throne. You tried it once. Sat on an overturned barrel and decreed that every dinner must include cheese. You were immediately overruled by the actual cook. Still, it felt powerful. The fire's lit now, the sun gone. Shadows stretch long, but the joy hasn't dimmed. Someone passes a jug of something stronger than usual. You sip. Your eyebrows retreat into your hairline. You cough. You sip again. You watch the fire. Listen to the crackle. Hear someone strumming a broken lute. It's out of tune. It's perfect. You think about how rare this is, how fragile, how you've survived plagues, famine, frost, and taxes. And yet here you are, barefoot, full-bellied, grinning like a fool at a goat skull under the stars. You remember your father saying once, "A man's only rich in the moments he forgets he's poor." You never understood that until tonight. So you let yourself sink into it, and the sound of laughter, the warmth of fire, the muddy dancing and leak breath contests and turnip jokes. You laugh, you drink, you dance. You forget, just for tonight. You forget. The dancing's over, the ashes in the village green are still warm, but the laughter's faded. You wake up groggy, legs sore, mouth dry. You slept like a stone. A happy stone, for once. You stretch, knock straw off your sleeve, and smile for no reason other than the taste of yesterday still lingering in your chest. But today feels different. Not in a bad way, not like a storm is coming or your tooth's about to betray you again, but like something in the air has shifted. Slightly, quietly, enough for you to notice, even if you can't name it. Outside, the morning fog's thinner than usual. The sky holds a bit more blue. Someone's singing a tune you don't recognize, but it's got rhythm. A bounce, a freshness. You step outside and hear hoofbeats, not the heavy, slow clop of noblemen or the creaky wheel of a tax cart. These are lighter, quicker, curious. You follow the sound and find a traveller. A stranger. That alone is cause for suspicion and gossip. But what really draws the crowd is what he carries. A bundle of long, rectangular things wrapped in cloth. He unrolls them on a bench near the well. Everyone leans in. They're not tools, not food. They're books. Books. Real ones. Bound in leather or stitched with heavy thread. You've seen a Bible once, behind glass in the church. But these are different, smaller, plainer. One even has a picture of a chicken on the front. You ask what they're for. Reading, he says, as if that explains everything. You nod like you understand. The man, his name is Emmerich, starts talking. He says things like typesetting and movable ink. He opens one book and shows lines of neat, crisp letters, black as soot, sharp as thorns. You can't read a word, but you can feel the weight of it. These symbols have power. You're not alone. Others are circling. Auntie Mirren squints at a page and mutters something about demons. The priest shows up, arms crossed, eyes narrow. He doesn't say anything, just watches. Emmerich's calm, says this isn't forbidden, says printing presses are popping up in cities now, that books are no longer chained to monastery walls, that stories, poems and sermons can be passed from hand to hand like apples. Historians still argue about how fast the printing press transformed peasant life. Some say it barely reached you. Some say it changed everything. You stand there, staring at the chicken book, and think, maybe both are true. Someone asks if there's a book about turnip cultivation. Emmerich chuckles. Not yet, he says. That yet lingers. You don't know how to read, but something about those pages makes you ache, makes you wonder what's hidden inside them. Knowledge, magic, recipes, a way to boil barley without making it taste like sadness. Later that week, Emmerich leaves, but he gives the priest a book. A small one, plain brown, no illustrations. The priest accepts it like it's hot, holds it away from his robe, but he doesn't throw it away. A week later, he's reading from it in church, slowly, stumbling over the words, but the congregation listens, eyes wide. That's not the only change. Someone down the road starts using a new plough, metal-tipped, lighter, sleeker. Says a cousin from the city sent it. It slices through the soil like a fish through water. You borrow it once. Your field has never looked so smug. Another villager starts brewing something he calls cider. It's apple-based and strong enough to make Hal dance with the chicken again, which might be becoming a tradition. Then come the clothes. A merchant passes through selling second-hand tunics from the city dyed blue. Real blue, like the sky on a good day. You've never owned colour before. You buy a scrap just to hold, just to see. More rumours follow. A woman down south started her own bakery, without a husband or priest's permission. A group of townfolk in the north pooled their silver and hired their own teacher. A mill was built by commoners, owned by them. You don't know if any of it's true, but it feels true. The ground beneath you still squelches. You still plant barley, still pick fleas off your sister, still pay your tithe and patch your shoes. But you also listen more. You look further down the road than you used to. And at night, when you lie in bed, you think about the world beyond the woods. There's a word you've heard whispered. Change. You're not sure what it means yet, but it sticks in your brain like a burr, uncomfortable, persistent. There's another word, too. Stranger. Bolder. Possible. You used to think the future was just more of the same. More mud, more grain, more aches. But now, you're not so sure. Maybe you'll learn to read. Maybe your sister will own her own farm. Maybe you'll see a city. Maybe you'll wear blue. Or maybe not. But the fact that you can imagine it, that's new. And maybe that's enough. It begins with a sound you haven't heard before. A low, rhythmic clatter echoing over the hill, like thunder politely knocking. You step outside into the misty morning and squint toward the noise. A cart, maybe. Or hooves. But slower, heavier. You watch the curve of the road. And then you see it. A wagon, yes, but not one pulled by oxen or mules. It's drawn by a strange, squat machine, grinding and coughing smoke into the air like a tired dragon with a hangover. It clanks along awkwardly, wooden wheels reinforced with metal rings. A man stands atop it, shouting instructions you don't quite catch. Children scream, not in fear, but in the way they always do when something confusing enters their world. The wagon rolls into the village square, wheezes once, then stops. Dead still, smoke rises like a beacon. Everyone stares. You approach slowly. The machine's side bears markings, painted letters in red. You can't read them, but they look important, like they belong somewhere wealthier, cleaner, somewhere else. Inside the wagon, books, tools, sheets of paper, and a woman, dressed in a brown tunic with black boots, face streaked with soot, steps down and starts speaking. "We're here to teach," she says. "To build, to listen." You blink, Hal mutters. She smiles, like she's heard that before. The villagers gather around. She opens crates, shows wooden gears, strips of linen, a shiny metal tube she calls a lench. She speaks of towns building their own windmills, of commoners voting like choosing your next meal. She talks of calendars and clocks and letters, not just the priest's Latin, but words anyone can learn. Historians still argue whether this era marked the start of peasant literacy, or if it was just a brief flicker in the dark. You don't know what the scholars will say. All you know is you feel awake. You raise your hand. You don't know why. It just happens. "What if we're not meant for this?" you ask. Your voice sounds smaller than you hoped. "What if all we know is dirt?" She pauses. Then, "Dirt grows more than food. It grows roots. It holds history. It remembers what the lords forget." The next day, someone brings her their daughter. "She's sharp," they say. "Teach her." The day after, a young man volunteers to fix the wagon's wheel. He's never touched a gear before. He's grinning like a fool by the time it spins. You keep working your field, but you glance back toward the square more often. You watch the children learn letters with sticks in the dirt. You hear new words being whispered. Curiosity, ownership, future. Your sister asks what a reblick is. You don't know, but you promise to find out. Then 2. The wagon stays, becomes part of the village. The woman, her name is Lysa, sets up a workshop in an old stable. People bring her things to mend, and questions. So many questions. The priest watches from the chapel steps. He hasn't stopped preaching, but even he softens, starts speaking in your language more often. You catch him scribbling notes on the back of a sermon scroll. You pretend not to notice. The old ways don't vanish. You still grow barley, still shoo chickens from your doorstep, still mutter prayers when the wind howls wrong. But the edges of your world are changing, not fast, not loud, but certainly. You find yourself remembering things more clearly, faces, stories, the way your mother sang to herself while stitching, the joke your father told that made no sense but always made you laugh, the time your friend threw a turnip at the steward's cart and got away with it. Just barely. You write them down. Slowly, awkwardly, but you do. You ask Lysa to show you how. She does, with patience, with ink, with a smile that says, she's seen this before. Soon your page is full of crooked letters, your story, your voice. You read it aloud. It sounds like truth. And then one day, the wagon leaves. Not because it's unwelcome, but because it must. There are other villages, other fires to kindle. You watch it vanish down the same road it entered, wheels rattling, smoke trailing behind like a question mark in the sky, and you go back to work. But not the same way. You're changed. Even if your feet still tread the same soil, your mind now stretches further, because the world is shifting, and for once, you're not just surviving it, you're part of it. And your story, your muddy, louse-bitten, barley-choked story, is worth remembering. Maybe not in the castles, but in the dirt, in the song your sister hums, in the words scratched into old wood, in the pages yet unwritten. The fields quiet as dusk drapes itself across the village. The last crows call from the trees. Smoke rises from hearths, lazy and soft. Inside your hut, the fire flickers low, casting warm shadows on the walls. The scent of bread, barely burnt this time, drifts through the air. Your sister is already asleep, her face tucked into the crook of her arm. The dog twitches beside her, chasing something in dreams. You lie on your pallet, the straw gently shifting beneath you as your breath slows. You've done enough for today. Outside, the stars begin to appear, faint but steady, like old friends returning. You hear a soft breeze rustle the thatch, and somewhere far off, an owl calls, once, then vanishes into the hush. The road is still out there, the forest, the cities you've never seen, the future creeping toward you in boots made of paper and change. But not tonight. Tonight, you rest. The ache in your shoulders begins to fade. Your hands grow still. The warmth of sleep wraps itself around you like an old cloak. You've earned it. The lords may forget your name, the books may miss your birth, but your story lingers, stitched into the soil, whispered in laughter, and carved into time in ways no ink can hold. You close your eyes. Fire crackles once more. Then only silence. The story ends here. Close your eyes, drift deep, sweet dreams,